No, that is not significant real property appraisal assistance. That's just help.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out once again in the podcast chair. We are, of course, sponsored by OREP Insurance. Today, OREP is the E&O that I'm in the process right now of renewing. It was super easy, super easy. OREP.org, OREP.org. And of course, we're sponsored by Spark. Spark allows you to download the information that you choose into your report. Spark4appraisers.com. Again, Spark4appraisers.com. I want to welcome back to the program, friend of the program, friend of mine, Mr. Tim Andersen. Tim, welcome back to the program, my friend.
Dustin, thank you. I appreciate it. It's always good to be here with you.
It's always good to have you, as always. I love your blue shirt, friend. Very nice.
Well, following the example, Dustin, it's difficult to fail to follow your example. So yeah, yes,
whatever. I have a hard time keeping up with you and your roadster bike. So Tim, on occasion, we do what we refer to as the Dear USPAP instructor episodes, and that basically entails questions that might come in from listeners. These two questions today, by the way, did not come in they may be listeners, but they actually came in from members of my All-Star team. And listeners to this program should understand that these questions have been answered. They actually came in several weeks ago, and the questions were answered. We didn't leave anybody hanging. But then I reached out and asked permission if I could utilize these on the air, because I thought they were, I was taught years ago as a teacher, if one student raises their hand and has the courage to ask a question, there's a pretty good chance that there's other people in that room that also have a similar, if not the same question. And so the purpose today, Tim, is to get some feedback from you for our listeners on questions that might be pretty common to both. So shall we dive in, my friend?
Let us dive, Dustin, dive away.
Here we go. Okay. The first one has to do with bias. And I know we've talked about that a little bit here, but this is kind of specific. So I'm just going to read to you the question. I'm not going to share the name of the individual. When I reached out to him or her, they said, please don't use my name, but they were fine with us sharing this question. So here's the question, word for word. Heard it again today from another appraiser accused of bias, or that there was another appraiser accused of bias. These are always the same. Appraiser A does an appraisal, house is whitewashed, that's their words, and appraiser B does a second appraisal. Appraisal B comes in higher, so two things are true. And by the way, this is said with sarcasm. Number one, appraiser A is biased, and number two, the appraisal with the higher value is the more accurate appraisal. My question is not whether or not this is fair. It clearly is not. My question is, when do we get to see the two reports side by side so we can really determine who is right? Or is that a USPAP confidentiality thing? Next time you talk to your buddy Tim A, would love his take. Tim A, what's your take?
Okay, Dustin H, okay, yeah, to some extent it's confidential. Okay. But let's back up and look at the details. There's the first appraisal that comes in at $1 million. Mm-hmm. Then they whitewash the house, and the second appraisal comes in at $1.2 million. Oh, well, therefore the first appraisal is wrong, the second appraisal is right. And but yet who decides whether they're wrong or right? Mm. Well, nobody does, quite frankly, because an appraisal is an opinion. It's nothing more. And I won't tell you what opinions are like, because that is obscene, and I won't mention it on a family show. Mm-hmm. Okay. But we all have them. We all form opinions. That's what we get paid to do. Now, the two opinions I mentioned were 20% apart, assuming low to high.
Sure.
That, quite frankly, not an outrageous range. Now, if the range was $1 million to $2 million, okay, yeah, that's probably an outrageous range. But 20%, that's really not that funky, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
So just there is a difference does not necessarily mean there's a distinction.
Okay.
And that's one of the questions the court has to answer. Now, obviously, let's look at the Lanham case in Baltimore. This started out, well, tragically. The spouse died, and the husband is the husband has been willing to settle the case, but this has got to the point now where there's got to be an answer. There's got to be answers to questions. So the case is continuing, and then Shane Lanham is also countersued for defamation, and so that's also now in the Lanham case, and that's not the name of the case. I forget the name of the plaintiff, but Shane Lanham is the appraiser.
Mm-hmm. By the way, let me just interrupt you and say, if appraisers, listeners to this program, if you care about this issue, reach out and donate to Shane. I'm not a good advocate for GoFundMe. I think that, anyway, I've got my opinions on GoFundMe, but there's other ways to get money to Shane for his defense. Anyway, continue, Tim.
Dustin, thank you. So in Shane's case, both appraisals are public record.
Okay.
I know I have them.
Okay.
And I got them from Shane's attorney, who because they were public record as soon as they were filed with the court, sent me a copy. Both of them. Now, I have not read them. I have formed no opinion as to the quality of either one of them.
Okay.
But that's not the point. The point is, in this particular case, they are available. So it would be possible to write to the court and ask for copies of them, and the court would provide them, usually on payment of proper fee.
Mm-hmm.
So if the appraisals are of record and the court, for whatever reason, has not sealed the record, which it could do, then they're available for comparison. But remember, the issue is, has there been discrimination?
Right, exactly.
And
the bias here.
Then the appraisal report itself is not necessarily the answer. So merely comparing the two appraisals is not going to answer the question, has there been bias?
Right.
That's going to have to go a lot further. And we're not going to get into the legal definition of bias for a whole bunch of reasons, but the big one is I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But we have to be careful. And, we tend to look at this from a relatively limited point of view. We tend to look at it as appraisers look at it. And we go, we don't appraise, or we're not biased. We don't appraise with bias.
Right.
And we don't. But the point is, how many times have you been driving 65 miles an hour in a 50-mile zone and said, oh, it's no big deal, I'm in a hurry? Well, yeah, you're in a hurry. And to you, speeding makes sense. But to the local constabulary, they really don't care.
Yeah,
you're speeding.
Right. So
we have to let the local constabulary decide what's going on.
Okay.
And then we have to learn from that. Now, the original decision way back in 2022 or 23 in Northern California, Tate Austin v. Miller, the plaintiffs asked the court to answer a whole bunch of questions. And one of them is the sales comparison approach inherently biased? Well, because this settled, the court didn't have to answer the question. So the court didn't. Okay. So as a result, we don't know if the sales comparison approach is inherently biased, because a theoretically unbiased body, in this case a court, did not have to answer the question. So we don't know. Okay. Well, that's still up in the air. But typically, unless the appraisal report or reports have been given to the court, that's become public record, and the record is not sealed, the appraisal reports are available for review. But we have to remember the court is going to look at them significantly differently than we do.
Yeah.
And typically, courts don't get all bent out of shape about USPAP compliance. Basically, the judge doesn't care.
Right.
If you call it a restricted appraisal report or an appraisal report, as long as it makes sense. and can help the judge, the trier of fact, answer the question. So just because we say, oh, well, appraisal Z didn't comply with USPAP. Well, maybe it didn't, but that may not make any difference to the court. So we cannot judge it from our point of view. And that's what way too many of us want to do. But yet that really doesn't mean anything to the court, nor is it going to teach us anything if the court decides that indeed the appraiser engaged in bias. The court is going to say, yes, the appraiser did, no, the appraiser didn't, and here are the reasons why. Mm-hmm. And then when we have those reasons, we can use those as a model, as a template. We can learn from those. So far, we don't have anything we can learn from.
Thank you, Tim. We're talking with Tim Andersen. He, of course, is the appraiser's advocate. When we get back, Tim, another question on the USPAP side. First, want to pause and remind everyone that we are sponsored by a couple of great companies. Folks, I just went through I hate even calling it a renewal process with OREP because it was so freaking easy. In fact, just because they are a sponsor here, I wanted to be able to bring real data to you folks. So I timed how much time I spent, quote unquote, renewing my E&O with OREP. 4 minutes and 3 seconds. That's what it took to fill out the quote unquote application for renewal. Now, I had to go through and do the payment thing. Okay. That maybe took another 4 minutes. Okay. But under 10 minutes, and I'm now renewed for the coming year. Folks, they make it easy, easy, easy. Check them out by going to orep.org. That's OREP.org. We, of course, are sponsored by Spark. Folks, there's been a little bit of a confusion. I sometimes hear people say this online, that they don't want a program choosing data for them. Well, guess what? Spark doesn't do that. You are in control. You are in power. You are the appraiser. And Spark simply takes that data that you've chosen, that you made the choice on, and plugs it into your report. It saves you time and it saves you energy. Yes, it also gives you some feedback on the market and what's the market, the trends and what they're doing and graphs, but they're all very understandable. No black box here, folks. This will help to save you time. And when you are working for yourself, self-employed folks, time equals money. So you save money by using a great program that will help you in your life. Spark for Appraisers is where you go. Spark, FOR, appraisers.com. And welcome back, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with my good friend, Mr. Tim Andersen, who brands himself as the appraiser's advocate. What does that mean, Tim? How are you an advocate for appraisers?
Well, I want to help appraisers stay out of trouble with their state appraisal boards. And that's what I do. Nice. So I do it through tutoring, mentoring, teaching, lecturing, speaking. And if, however, the state appraisal board does send that letter, I also help appraisers overcome that whenever that's possible. Mm-hmm. And when that's not possible, to ameliorate the results. And many times a state will charge an appraiser with 47 things, knowing full well they're going to negotiate 42 of them away. Right. And that's where I come in. And I show the state that really that's not a problem. A quick example, and I was not involved in this, but I'm well aware of it. A particular state, and I won't mention which one, charged an appraiser with not including original photographs in the appraisal report. And this was proceeding through to rather nasty results until someone stood up and said, hello, State Appraisal Board, USPAP doesn't have photography standards. Mm-hmm. Therefore, under USPAP, you cannot charge an appraiser with violating USPAP by not including photographs. Yep. And the chairman of the board looked over at the board's attorney, and the board's attorney said, let me look. And after about 2 minutes of looking, the board attorney said, oh, that's right. So as a result, those charges had to be dropped.
Yeah.
But let's face it, appraisal board members tend to be overworked and underpaid, and sometimes they don't get the best advice in the world.
Yep, for sure. And speaking of which, the question that we have from Charlie, who is a member of my All-Star team, I think fits into that category as well, is separating these two things, right? So we sometimes get in the mode. I'm just going to set this up by saying this, Tim. We sometimes, as appraisers, get in the mode of thinking that things just are because they always have been, right? And this is one of those. The question is the inspection? And by the way, I would maybe even tweak that word a little bit and say observation, right? Observation of the subject. Is the inspection or observation of the subject considered significant assistance per USPAP? What say you?
Okay, first of all, there is no such thing as significant assistance.
Okay.
The act language USPAP is significant real property appraisal experience. Okay. So before I can answer the question, we've got to set it up properly.
Okay.
So is significant appraisal assistance something you have to disclose? No, because there's no such thing. Okay. Now, let's get to significant real property assistance. All right. Now, you hire me to go take pictures. Okay. Now, I'm state certified general real estate appraiser. Okay. And I go take pictures and I send them to you. Dear Dustin, here are the pictures. See enclosed invoice. I have not provided you, see large invoice. I have not provided you with significant real property appraisal assistance because I have sending you photographs does not help you form a value opinion. You get that from the comparable sales. Now you can say, oh, okay, sale number 3 is a dump. I need to make an upward condition adjustment. Okay. But you would have known that from the photographs no matter who took them, whether you took them or I took them.
Right.
Okay? So, Dustin, you hire me to go take pictures, and I go take pictures. And while I'm there, I notice that the house next door and across the street both have for sale signs in the front yard.
Okay.
So I stopped and I talked to people. And the particular house that we're looking at is under contract for $675. But these two houses, again, next door and across the street, are for sale at prices significantly less than that. So, Dustin, I don't know where you came in. That's none of my business. But you might want to rethink that in light of this listing information. Okay. I've provided you with real property appraisal assistance, and therefore you ideally would have to have list me as having done so. You don't have to say what I did,
right? Okay,
but you would say, "Thank you, Tim Andersen, who provided me with significant real property appraisal assistance." But just taking the pictures, no. Your secretary typing the report, no. You hire your daughter's boyfriend to go down to the courthouse and pull deeds. No, that is not significant real property appraisal assistance. That's just help. Okay. And appraisers will say, well, okay, I'll just list them anyway to be sure. Well,
yeah, so that was I'm glad you said that because that was my next question, because I've heard people say, well, I would just rather be, safe than sorry, so I'll just put their name in there. Is there a problem doing that?
Yeah, there is. And that problem is called competency. And competency means you know what USPAP requires and does not require. And when you say, well, I'd rather be safe than sorry, so I'll include them, what you're saying is, I am insufficiently competent.
Right.
Is that sufficient? I am sufficiently incompetent. It's one of the two. I don't remember. Right. I'm sufficiently unaware of what USPAP says that I'm willing to include something that isn't necessary that I included. So now, is the state board going to nail an appraiser for that? No, quite frankly. Especially if that's the only issue that were to come up. But a state board might send that appraiser a letter of counsel saying, you did this, it's not wrong, but it means you don't understand the competency rule and you don't understand what USPAP requires relative to significant real property appraisal assistance. Therefore, our counsel is, and they tell you what to do. But is that the worst thing that could happen? Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
And no, and the state isn't going to get bent out of shape about it. The client isn't going to get bent out of shape about it. But it raises the issue of, are you competent?
Mm-hmm.
You know what it is you're supposed to do. And if you look at the competency rule, basically it says before you even think about taking the job, you've got to be competent to complete it successfully.
Right.
And success is not USPAP's word. Credibly is USPAP's word. You've got to be able to complete it credibly. And then if you can't, then you either walk away from the assignment or you have to train yourself into competency, hire yourself out to someone who is competent, or hire someone who is competent. But just to take the job knowing you're not competent, that's misleading, because when you take the job, you're implying to the client,
Right,
you're competent to do. And if you're not, and you don't disclose that, and you don't try to overcome it, yeah, that can be a serious issue with the state, especially if it's not the appraiser's first rodeo.
Right. Yeah, so I'm going to challenge you a little bit, Tim, because I'm going to take something you said earlier, and because I think I understand what you're saying. However, you said earlier that the state board is often overworked and underpaid. And let's just be honest, I'm just going to put it out there. Sometimes the state board is made up of individuals who are somewhat ignorant when it comes to these types of things. And so then you run into the challenge of, okay, just hypothetically, Dustin Harris hires somebody to go take pictures. Doesn't put that person's name in the report because that person is, number one, not an appraiser. Number two, just took pictures. I didn't mislead in any other way. I didn't say that I didn't take pictures or what have you. And then my report comes before the state board. Somehow it comes out that this other individual had taken pictures and they weren't disclosed in the report. And someone says, well, that was significant appraisal assistance and you didn't disclose it and therefore you're in trouble. And you say, no, it's not significant appraisal assistance. And by the way, there's no such thing. You see the dichotomy here that sometimes appraisers think, well, geez, I'll just put somebody's name in there because I don't want to hide anything. I don't want to even wade into that water.
Mm-hmm. And I can't argue with you.
Yeah.
I get all the time. I get appraisers. I tell appraisers what they should have done to not get in trouble. And then they say, well, for the crummy fee I got, and I can't say whatever the fee was, but for the crummy fee I got, I can't do that much. And what I say is, you know what? I agree with you. You can't. But now sell that to the state board.
Right, exactly.
And you can't. It's that simple. So, but then this is why you get somebody like me or somebody like Craig Capilla or Mel Black or Janine Isaacson used to be Peter Christensen, but now with his new job, he can't represent appraisers, who will get up before the board and say, guys, look, that's not what USPAP says. Here's what it says. Right. And because of what it says, because taking pictures is not real property appraisal assistance, then the appraiser has done nothing wrong. And then the board's going to say something, well, I should have disclosed it and blah, blah, blah. No. Now, at that point, it's up to the attorney to figure, how far are you going to argue? You won the point. Okay, give them a little bit. Say, well, okay, yeah, maybe they should, but technically, no. But then that's up to you and your counsel. Right. But what I'm trying to do is get to the point where you're not up in front of the board. Now, can anybody bring any appraiser up before any state board at any time they want to for any silly ass reason? Yes, they can. And yes, I said silly ass reason. Okay, but the board also usually and let me stress, usually has the brains to say, well, it's really kind of dumb. We're going to dismiss this.
Mm-hmm.
And they dismiss it.
Yep. Tim Andersen, thank you. How do people get a hold of you if they want to get prepared or prepare their reports in such a way that they avoid this type of thing, or if they find themselves in trouble with a state board and they need an advocate on their side? How do they reach out to you, friend?
Dustin, thank you. Tim at theappraisersadvocate.com, and tell me what's going on, and we'll figure something out.
Thank you. I appreciate it as always. Wisdom is wide, and hopefully listeners are listening. And thank you. I appreciate your time. I should note, everybody, that Tim does not get paid to come on my program. He does it out of the goodness of his heart. He cares about appraisers. And he is checks in the mail, and he's just a good guy. So thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. And until next time.
Dustin, thank you. My best to your family. We'll be in touch.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.